All right, you guys, today we have Lee Carroll. Carroll spelled with two R's and two L's. It's a little tricky. Lee was actually a guest presenter at the AHVMA this year. I have missed Lee everywhere. And then all of a sudden he was at the feed reel as just a attendee. And I was so excited to even see him. Didn't really get much chance to talk to him because he was bombarded by everybody. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed your American tour. I'm so excited that I get to talk to you today. I wanted to give you some space because I know it was probably a monster trip. I think you were here for about a month, I think.
Yeah,
Is
just on a month.
Yeah, so Lee's been in the holistic health industry for humans for over 30 years. He's been a naturopath. You guys can see we are actually in his clinic today, which is super cool. You guys see his tinctures, tonics, and it's just bottles and bottles and bottles, and then real mushrooms up there. So fun to see that. Welcome. And you are coming live from Australia. This is your summer. You're in your t-shirt.
Yeah, it's quite hot at the moment, hot and humid. It the feels like temperature was 102 degrees yesterday, and we're very early days in summer.
That's amazing. That's so trippy for me to think that it is your Christmas, summer Christmas with short days, and then your winter is longer days. Is that true?
Yeah, the other way around. So summer we've got the very long days,
Oh, good.
and winter the shorter days. So yeah, it's trippy having Christmas in summer. Like the roast goose and all of the all of the roasted vegetables and gravy and plum puddings and things just don't make any sense when it's like 100 degrees Fahrenheit outside.
Not one bit. Not one bit. How were you born in Australia?
I was, yeah.
You're
And
native.
Australia's a big place. I was born down south, and I live in Queensland now, which is um, as big as Texas in the northern part of the country. So it's a sort of subtropical climate.
Amazing. How'd you get involved in holistic?
Yeah, it's a common place to start, hey, with an interview. And I've got a similar story to many other people, like in the healthcare industry. I had an interest as a younger person. I and it was cannabis, I think, that really kind of switched me on to the power of medicinal plants. I didn't grow up in an alternative household, and when I went to university, based on my cannabis experience and my interest in Eastern philosophies, I decided that I wanted to study botany. So I did a botany zoology degree, and that kind of really amplified my interest. But there's not very many career options unless you want to be a school teacher or a researcher. So I got otherwise employed in industry and was doing something totally outside of my qualifications. And then in 1990, I was 30. A friend of mine had set up a company called MediHerb. The MediHerbs are the green bottles on the background behind me, labels on the bottles. And he had set up a company called MediHerb and asked me would I like to be the production manager. So I was like, oh my God, that's my dream job. So um, at that age, my health wasn't so good. I'd just been diagnosed with insulin resistance, and the doctor said, Lee, you're a pretty healthy guy, but if you don't get a handle on this, you're going to be diabetic, and then life will be hell. So that really forced me to focus, particularly on my diet and my stress levels. I always exercised and thought I was healthy. So joining that company was like beginning the old school apprenticeship, where I learned how I was the production manager initially. So I learned how to make all the extracts and had a very thorough schooling in everything to do with herbs without ever actually laying a hand on a patient. And then over the course of many years, I in that with that company, I worked for them for nearly 30 years. I had the opportunity to do all of the jobs and have like the complete education. And then back in 2013, I decided that it was time to go back and get the qualifications to formalize all of the things that I'd learned as the apprentice. And so I've been in clinic just very part time since 2013. And I've got online courses, and I do education for people. And I'm now the chief medical herbalist for Real Mushrooms since February of this year.
Congratulations. How exciting is that? And
Yeah,
I
it's
see that,
fantastic. I'm loving it. Yeah.
yeah, and I see that Real Mushrooms has some new products coming out, or they have the ergo product, and maybe something else. I know the Daily Dog is Doc Silver's
Yeah, and there's
like,
a new veterinary focused product called Functional Feline that, if it hasn't launched, it's imminent. Yeah,
that's exciting.
it
Very
is.
cool. You know, cats need a lot of help.
Oh, they do. Yeah, clearly I'm the human, kind of practitioner, but there's a lot of overlap, and a lot of, the same philosophies apply. And the poor old cats just, don't get supported with what their dietary needs are, in a conventional setting.
Yeah, and they're sensitive, they're small, they're opinionated, they're they we don't really know much about cats in regards to holistic. It's a little more trial and error than dogs and horses and
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
definitely.
Well, because you've been a human clinical herbalist, I was really impressed when I met you to meet Fiona, who claimed that you helped her sister in cancer. So you,
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
yeah, and I didn't even know that was something you did, was like cancer consultations and things like that. And you do that on Zoom, right?
Mostly I see patients on Zoom now. Yeah.
And yeah, it's that kind of world now, which is really fortunate for us to unite the world with great people like you.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I didn't get my first computer until I was 30, so I've experienced a lot of change. And early on in the clinic, no one wanted to do an online consult, and now that's all everybody wants to do.
Yeah, from the comfort of your own home. That is amazing. So what stimulated your love of mushrooms? Mushrooms are a little different beasts. They aren't necessarily herbs. You wouldn't put them in the herbal category, would you?
I would, yeah. The fungi and herbs are in different kingdoms of life. So if you're in the kingdom Plantae, you're called a plant. If you're in the kingdom fungi, you're called a fungi or a fungus, for the singular. And that distinction was only made in the 1960s. And the word herbal, in terms of the context of using it as a treatment modality, has been around long before the 1960s. So, in that kind of development of the language, herbal means combining both. And my mushroom kind of knowledge was pretty scant. The company that I worked for didn't have only had one mushroom product, and mushrooms had been pigeonholed just as cancer treatments. And there's been a lot of research, relatively kind of recently, because, over 30 years, that's a long time to be involved in a discipline. So it's really the last, 10, 15 years where the research has really kind of taken off. So I didn't know much about mushrooms. When I left MediHerb and branched out, started doing my own thing, I wanted to focus on something new. This was back in 2020. So mushrooms were just kind of happening then. And I thought, oh, wow, this is something that I can sink my teeth into, and, differentiate myself and create, a level of expertise around, an area where there was just not many experts, like teaching on how to incorporate mushrooms, like in a clinical setting.
Mushrooms can be used for almost everything under the sun, it seems like. Did you
Yeah,
use,
well, we're kind of scratching the surface in terms of what we know about the medicinal use of fungi. And in the common usage, there's only, maybe a dozen mushrooms that get regularly consumed, but there's literally hundreds of mushrooms that are used in other countries that have got medicinal properties that we don't like fully appreciate yet. So I think there's kind of a limited repertoire with mushrooms at the moment. there's many more herbs than there are mushrooms. So, I couldn't practice as a herbalist if I just only had mushrooms to work with. But I think, down the track, we're going to see a huge influx of very highly specific mushrooms that do very highly specific things. And on that topic, because when we talk about a mushroom, we're talking about the actual reproductive structure or the fruiting body, which is just, it's like picking an apple off a tree. It's not the whole organism. It's just like a part of it. But the mycelium, or you could call it the vegetative body or the main organism. The organism of the fungus produces lots of unique chemistry, and many of the world's best-selling pharmaceutical drugs have got their origins in a fungus. So all of the organ rejection, transplant rejection drugs, the immunosuppressives, all come from those. All the statins come from fungi. But there's just this long laundry list of drugs that have been derived from a fungus. So we're really just kind of at the beginning of our kind of understanding, I think, of this really fascinating area.
That's really incredible. I had no idea.
Yeah, it is fascinating. And even with fungi live everywhere in the world. There isn't a place where you can't find a fungus. And inside a plant, there's a whole classification of endophytic fungi that live inside plants. And many of the compounds that we use medicinally from a plant aren't actually made by the plant. They're made by the fungus that lives in the plant. So there's these kind of symbiotic relationships. It really is fascinating. And I'm now of the opinion that animals, including us, and our pets, can't be optimally healthy without the regular intake of mushroom extracts or mushroom constituents like ergothioneine.
So Lee, you were mentioning like the mycelium, and I know there's a horse product out there that touts it's primordial also is part of their selling point. What's the difference? There's so much debate between mycelium, whether it has to be grown in nature for it to be effective. Often it's just grown in a lab. It feels a little scandalous, for lack of a better word.
Well, this is the challenge, because my career's been in the practitioner market, where I've only focused on talking and dealing with practitioners, where to become a practitioner, there's a certain rigor, in terms of the educational process that you go through. So there's a certain level of attainment of background knowledge and information that allows you to have a meaningful conversation. In the public space, it's much, much harder to do that. So it's easy for companies to trick people, into buying, something that doesn't have the evidence base to support it. So let's just use some examples that, make it simple. So if you take a plant, and I'll compare that to a fungus. So just using a really, simple analogy, if you want to have an apple, you go to the apple tree and you pick the apple. You don't go to the apple tree and pick the leaves and eat them. You don't go to the apple tree and dig up the roots and eat the roots. We know that it's the fruit that provides the nutrients, and eating any other part of that plant, might be problematic. So there's the chemistry of the various parts of the plant deliver the medicine. So, there's lots of plants that have got different medical properties based on which part of the plant you choose. So like the common dandelion that grows in your garden, the root is a really profound liver tonic, and it's got very highly specific chemistry that has the capacity to do that. So when a herb has a physiological effect, it's not some mystery or magical process. It's directly related to the chemistry. And the quality of those dandelion roots, the quality of their chemistry, therefore dictates how good a liver tonic it will be. So if you have a really inferior quality dandelion root, one that has been poorly dried, so it might have been left, and gone a bit moldy, or it might have, not been dried properly, the chemistry won't be there to support that. And then equally, the above ground parts of the dandelion plant are a urinary tract supporting, feature. So they have the ability to promote diuresis. So you can increase your urine flow when you consume the dandelion leaves. So And they've got totally different chemistry to what's in the root. So again, it's the chemistry that dictates that. So a fungus is a more difficult organism to get our head around because we don't ever see it. The main part of a fungus lives inside the thing that it's digesting. So it's either in the soil, it's in the dead log or the dead tree, or in the case of a cordyceps, it's inside an insect which is buried in the ground, and all we ever see are the mushrooms or the fruiting bodies, and we make the mistake of thinking that mushroom is actually the whole organism. So if we were to divide up the fungus into its different parts, just like I did with the plant using the apple and the dandelion examples, the fungus has got mycelium, which is the main body of the fungus, and its purpose in life is to seek out food, consume that food, and survive and prosper. And when conditions are right, produce a reproductive structure that will produce the spores that will allow the organism to propagate its species. So you've got basically those two aspects to the life cycle. And then the fruiting body produces spores, which are like the seeds, or the sperm or the egg, like in terms of an animal analogy. And then they come together and they produce another organism. So when you look at the mycelium, when you look at the mushroom, you've got totally different chemistry. And it's the chemistry that dictates the benefits that you get when you consume that part. So there's all of the traditional knowledge that we have about mushrooms come from the fruiting body or the mushroom, the reproductive structure. And then there's some modern science, which began in the late 60s, where scientists said, hey, these mushrooms are really fabulous in terms of what they can do, particularly in the immune system. The reductionist scientific mind says there must be one thing in there that's driving this immune benefit, this anti-cancer benefit, this whatever benefit. So let's find out what that one thing is, and then we'll turn it into a drug and we'll make $1 squillion. So scientists put the fungus into a tank with liquid and grew the fungus. So they had pure mycelium. And then they extracted that, and then they found some beta glucans that indeed had some biological effects, and they got turned into a whole lot of drugs. So there's a whole lot of mycelium-based products that are legitimately developed around using a research model, proving that they're effective. But that allows a company to come along and say, well, I've got mycelium, so I can make the same claims. But if you can't say you've got the same chemistry, then you can't make that same claim. And then the incredibly confusing thing for people now is that, and this is the most dominant supposedly mushroom product in the market, is a thing that's called mycelium fermented grain. So companies take brown rice or sorghum or oats, they cook it, then they infect it with the fungus, whether it's shiitake or turkey tail or reishi or chaga or whatever. And then they allow that mycelium to grow in that substrate, and then they dry it, and then they package it and sell it as if it's a mushroom. So there's no evidence. There's a tiny little bit of evidence. There's no traditional knowledge around using that. In the US, novel products like that need a new dietary ingredient application to allow the FDA to sell them. No new dietary ingredient applications have ever been filed. And when you look at the chemistry of those particular products, they're vastly different to the mushroom, and they're mostly grain. There's only about 10% of that product is actually mycelium. And if you use an example like reishi, which is very illustrative, reishi grows on wood, and it needs the wood to create the secondary metabolites, the triterpenes that many people know about. And triterpenes are really bitter, so you can taste this. And the very best quality reishi is very, very bitter. People don't find it very palatable. So when you grow reishi on brown rice, or chaga for that matter, there isn't any wood there, so there's no lignin, no raw material for the fungus to convert into its secondary metabolites. So those mycelium fermented grains don't have any of those particular chemistry elements, so you don't get any of those benefits from taking that supplement. So that's how easily it is for people to get tricked. And then there's all sorts of language and tricks that companies use to reinforce that they're actually buying a mushroom rather than buying a mycelium fermented grain. Like they use images of mushrooms on the labeling. Often these companies have got mushroom in their name. And then they like to use lots of marketing tactics and tricks and have very influential and well-known people promote them to give a good kind of placebo effect.
Yeah, it's crazy because I started looking into the mycelium because I was taking a mushroom product and I felt like I was getting a yeast infection. I was like, why am I getting sicker? And so
Yeah.
I started researching and realized that it was like glutinous and hardly any mushroom product actually in that product. And so that's where I was like, okay, this is a little sketchy. And so thank you for clarifying that. That's amazing.
Yeah, it is. It's very sketchy. It's scandalous, and it's a very emotional topic, and people get very vested emotionally, and it's almost like people are brainwashed. And I could try and have a scientific conversation with someone, from that industry, and it becomes very heated and emotional because they're trying to defend their turf where there's no science to defend it, and it's all smoke and mirrors, but they're brainwashed into thinking that they're doing the right thing.
Well, it's funny because I've called some horse product companies and asked them about their resources, and they got incredibly defensive to the point where they hung up on me. And I was just like, okay, clearly you have a problem. like,
Yeah,
like if you're gonna throw a fit about this, you're hiding something.
yeah.
Yeah.
And the claims for those products are all derived from the mushroom traditional knowledge, and in some cases the mushroom modern research, whereas there's none of the chemistry in those products, and there's no historical use. So even the claims that get made are fraudulent. If those products do in fact have any therapeutic benefit, the research needs to be done to prove what those benefits are, and that hasn't been done yet. There's very few clinical trials. You can count them on one hand. Whereas with mushrooms, there's more than 20,000 clinical trials, across a whole range of mushrooms. And mostly the mushroom that's clinically trialed is turkey tail. And then people say in the industry, oh, there's all of this research, when there's only just a little bit on turkey tail. There's a little couple on maybe, animal studies on lion's mane, and then it gets applied to the whole gamut of all of the fungi that are used medicinally. It just really is. But
It's
it
overwhelming.
confounds me. Yeah. And I don't know
Yeah.
why it's so difficult to get the message across. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and then there's a lot of social media that like run with some fake info and so everybody that watches that reel thinks that that is real science and runs with it. So
Yeah.
what about liquid versus powder?
Yeah, good question. Clearly, I'm a fan of liquids. You can't see them all behind me, but there's 3 more shelves of liquids. I have about 90 different liquid herbal medicines on my shelf that I regularly use. I have experimented with liquid mushroom products, and didn't find them to be um, as effective. So I exclusively use mushroom extracts in their dried form now. So, and I've heard a lot of crazy things said about this distinction between liquids and powders. A liquid form of a medicine is a very legitimate and a very traditional way to do it. My problem with mushroom liquids is that they're never strong enough to make it effective and economical in terms of the dosing. So clearly there's some benefits with liquids. It's if you can just squirt it into an animal's mouth or a human's mouth, it's easy to take it in. You can squirt it on the food. You could say the same with a powder. It's easy
Well,
to
yeah.
sprinkle it on the food. It's less easy to just put it in your mouth. But I like to distill it down to the quality and the efficacy and the affordability to the patient. So let's just touch on some of those features. So if you've got a dried mushroom and you turn it into a liquid, the liquid will always be weaker. There are some exceptions, but the liquid will always be weaker than that dried mushroom, because
It's basically it's a dilution.
it's a dilution, yeah. And the most common dilution in the market is a 1:4 dilution. So one pound of mushroom makes 4 pounds of liquid extract. That's the most common thing that you see. On the shelf behind me, the practitioner strength ones that I use, I'm typically using a 1:2. So 1 pound of herb makes 2 pounds of liquid extract. And that gives you the ability to dose it at a place which is therapeutic but also economical. So with a mushroom liquid, therefore, if you wanted to use, and the dosing needs to be scientific. So if the dose is 1 gram of a mushroom, for your animal a day, then you'd need to use 4 milliliters of a 1:4 to get the equivalent of 1 gram. But if you're using a dried extract like the sort that real mushrooms sell, so say you took lion's mane, it's a 1:1 extract. So you'd only need 1 gram of that. You wouldn't need 4 grams. So it's going to be more economical because you don't need as much of it. And in real mushrooms, the reishi is an 8:1 and the turkey tail is an 8:1. So if you wanted 1 gram, you'd only need an eighth of a gram, which makes it even more affordable.
That's amazing. The potency on that.
Then you've got the quality issues, and beta glucans are a kind of the most prominent quality metric for a mushroom. And beta glucans are a constellation of molecules, and different mushrooms have got different types of them. And they're a very complex group which support immune function, and they're also very profoundly prebiotic, and they support the health of the gut. And the levels of those vary in mushrooms, and there's currently no validated test method for testing of beta glucans in liquid. So products that have got liquid that have beta glucan numbers on the liquid, you have to question how those numbers were arrived at. And if you work backwards, from the science end of the spectrum, a product like reishi, the reishi mushroom only has about 1% of soluble beta glucans in it. So if you make a mushroom extract, if you make that 1:4 that we were just talking about, which is the most dominant one, then you'll only, if there's 1% soluble beta glucan in the mushroom, you can only get 1/4% in the 1:4 extract, which is only 2.5 milligrams per mil. And then I've seen labels that claim up to 40% beta glucans in their product, which makes it quite misleading. And then there's lots of misinformation about the quality and the shelf life of liquids versus powders. All of the dried extracts that I have worked with in my career, and as part of my work early on, I created an extract factory. I installed a spray dryer. I worked out the concentration equipment to make spray dried extract. So I've got a very high level of expertise in that area. And dried extracts are very stable, typically over a period of 3 and up to 5 years. So not just real mushrooms, but all the companies that make dried extracts, both herbal and mushroom, they're very, very stable. So anybody that says dried extracts oxidize because they get in contact with the oxygen in the air, it's just a made up non-scientific claim to try and trick people into thinking that dried extracts are somehow inferior. And liquids have got the same problem. They can degrade over time. Anything degrades over time. So with a dried extract, its shelf life is good for up to 3 years and sometimes up to 5 years.
That's amazing. Now on the I'm just blown away, Lee, because you're talking about reishi and how it has just like 1%, and you would have to take like half a bottle for you to get to a therapeutic dose of beta glucan. My sister had lymphoma, and she actually did fraction D. She did lots of Mataki fraction D. She did tons of cat's claw. She did so much of it that she started her own chemo in her own way. She started losing her hair. She's alive today. She did eventually, she had a tumor. By the time they caught it to her, that tumor was gone, but they didn't know where her like they didn't know if she was a stage 1 or a stage 4. They convinced her to do a couple rounds of chemo, but she is alive today with no remission, and she is doing fabulous. So I
Yeah,
don't
that's
see
fantastic.
anybody talk about Mataki. Like Mataki seems to have taken second fiddle to turkey tail. Turkey tail's like the claim to fame now.
Yeah, it is. And people get switched on by marketing. And I think lion's mane is like number one in terms of mushroom sales. But yeah, I think maitake is very underrated. And it's not just for, you know, the cancer support that you just mentioned, but it's great for osteopenia, which is particularly a problem with, you know, with female humans, not so much of a problem with dogs, but also with polycystic ovarian syndrome. And it's very underrated just for immunological support. And most of what we need to do in terms of longevity and cancer work is in the prevention category. And I think that, you know, when we get good quality extracts and you do them regularly across the course of your life, that's where it has the benefits. So before we move on though, it is possible to have a good quality liquid. My only issue with them, and a good quality liquid would need to be decocted, so the mushroom would be boiled. And when they're done well, my only issue is that you need 4 times more of a liquid compared to a 1-in-1, or a lot more if you're comparing it to a concentrated dry extract. And therefore, in many cases, the economy is not there, the affordability isn't there for the patient.
Well, and I had no idea that if reishi is grown on a different substrate than its original design, that it's not really that effective.
Yeah, and real mushrooms grow all of their reishi the traditional way on a wooden log that's been buried in the soil, like in pristine wilderness in China, which is the original forests in some cases where reishi was very first harvested. And in terms of shiitake, where the traditional methodologies were developed, you know, like 800 years ago, in terms of how to cultivate them. So honoring those traditional techniques, having the ancestral owners of that wisdom, you know, grow the mushrooms and manage their growth and in control of the process is a really huge, you know, benefit. And China grows like 95% of the world's mushrooms, and it's where all of the medicinal mushroom knowledge pretty much was originated. There was some in Japan, there's some in Korea, there are some other Asian countries, but China is kind of like the head and shoulders in terms of the technology and the use of mushrooms.
People freak out when you say the word China. Like they
They
really
do, yeah.
assume that it's going to be sub quality and maybe adulterated, but it almost sounds like they have their own heirloom version of all these um, medicinal mushrooms, that they have the original DNA for that.
Yeah, well, heirloom's a good way to describe it. But real mushrooms have, because every living thing's got its own varieties. You know, like you can see that in the vegetables. You know, like how many different types of lettuce and tomato can you buy? You know, like there's just all these. They're all tomatoes and they're all lettuce, but they're all different. They taste different. They look different. So it's the same with mushrooms. So it's a matter of picking the varieties which have got the medicinal history, or the modern varieties which have optimized, you know, certain characteristics, whether it's a particular type of beta glucan or something like that. So all of the real mushroom products are using varieties which guarantee, you know, high quality, but also consistency. If you wildcraft, that can be great, but when you're producing, you know, as much material as Real Mushrooms parent company Namex does, um, picking from the wild introduces quite wild variations in the quality. So having a cultivated variety means that you've got very consistent standards between batch to batch, so that when you're using it in a clinical setting or with an animal, you know that you're always going to get the same benefits. It's not going to drift or move around too much.
That's so
But
encouraging.
yeah, just coming back to that point about China, though, I've been around a long time, and in my early days, we used to import a lot of herbs from China directly, and I saw firsthand, the scandalous behaviour of various suppliers. I don't think ethics. I don't think one country kind of has a stranglehold on being unethical. I think there's unethical people everywhere in the world, and you need to be careful about what you do. But what I do know is that when you import a material from a foreign country into the US, and I've got a unique perspective on this because I was the US manager for MediHerb for many years, so I was at the forefront of bringing all of the materials into the US to sell them. And the FDA creates a trade barrier around importation of things, and we could buy echinacea roots from Oregon that were organic. We could freight them to Australia, turn them into an extract, and then the FDA would say, we're not going to let you bring them in because we've detected pesticides in the product. And like, what? Like, we bought it from you. It passed all of your internal standards. Now you won't let us sell it back in. So I think when you make an extract in China and import it into the US, it has to comply with all of the standards. It's clean. The microbiological burden is exactly where it should be. There's no pesticides. There's no heavy metals. There's no contaminants. It's very, very high quality, and it wouldn't get into the country if it didn't meet those standards. So all you can boil it down to is just people's general lack of awareness around what the processes are, and their vulnerability to marketing tactics that companies use to try and scare people away. And Real Mushrooms and the Namex, the parent company, they were the ones that actually introduced organic standards for mushroom growing into China. It was just based on Namex's philosophy of only using organic, that the organic mushroom industry flourished in China. So, Namex has been like a guiding force and influence around quality, since 1987, when the company was first set up.
I'm so encouraged to hear that actually our FDA is really like conscientious about organic and clean materials. I didn't think they were actually.
Well, when it comes to trade barriers, they are for sure. Yeah.
Interesting. Now, what is this ergothionine? Can you go down this road? Because I know there's some new science, new emerging mushroom studies, and some new products hitting the market, and Real Mushrooms seems to be the forefront on this.
Yeah, definitely. It's a fascinating topic. And humans, in fact, all animals and all fungi share a common ancestor that goes back a thousand million years, about 1 billion years ago. And so we share a lot of similarities biochemically, physiologically. And this is one of the reasons why we should be consuming mushrooms on a regular basis, is because mushrooms have got things that are similar to us. And when we share them, we get the benefit. And one of the most important areas of this overlap is this molecule ergothioneine. So ergothioneine is used by a fungus as its main antioxidant mechanism inside cells. And in humans, because we've inherited, that same physiology, it's not the dominant antioxidant in human cells, it's the backup antioxidant. So in all of our cells, we use glutathione as the primary way of dealing with oxidative stress. And glutathione levels go up and down. And then when glutathione levels go down, the cell, it gets recycled, and the cell is a little bit vulnerable to the oxidative stress. And ergothioneine is the backup antioxidant that protects cells when glutathione's low. When glutathione comes back up, ergothioneine takes a back seat. So there's this natural interplay. And many cells in the animal body naturally experience high levels of stress, like the linings of your blood vessels, the liver, depending on what you're consuming in terms of food. The eye is exposed to very high levels of oxygen and also UV light. Red blood cells are very highly exposed to oxidative stress because of all of the iron molecules to do with the hemoglobin. A red blood cell's got about 250 million iron molecules in it. So there's a huge amount of potential for oxidative damage because of the oxygen interacting with the iron in uncontrolled ways. So in
So
all of those
wait,
tissues,
this is crazy. I didn't know that. And that would cause you to internally rust, basically.
yeah, but there's mechanisms to deal with that. So, um,
As
so
long as long as we methylate naturally.
no, as long as we've got enough ergothioneine. So in a red blood cell,
Okay.
ergothioneine is the dominant antioxidant which keeps the iron from misbehaving. So ergothioneine has not only got the ability to be an antioxidant, but it also makes complexes with divalent metals. So it's the dominant intracellular mechanism that helps to control the stress environment in red blood cells. And researchers have just discovered that when you have more ergothioneine in your red blood cells, blood bags that are sitting in the blood bank where you go to get a transfusion, the blood has a longer shelf life when it's got more ergothioneine in it. So, I wouldn't be surprised if we see signs up, over the blood bank saying, eat your mushrooms today, or have you taken your ergothioneine?
Before you donate, please go eat your.
Before you donate. So there are cells in the body that naturally need ergothioneine to protect them from becoming, challenged as we age. And then in every tissue in our body, ergothioneine plays a role as an intracellular backup. And it almost meets the definition of a vitamin. So when we consume a mushroom, we have transporter proteins, which are kind of like gateways or doorways, which allow the ergothioneine to get taken up into the body. And once it gets into the body, into the cells, it can't get out and it gets stuck there. It's got a very long half-life. It's for a water-soluble vitamin, it has a half-life of 30 days. So if you took 10 milligrams today, in a month, 5 of those milligrams would still be left in your body. And what we know from the human evidence, and there's a lot of animal studies, particularly rats and mice and a few other different animals, where low levels of ergothioneine are very highly associated with increasing rates of very highly particular diseases as we age. So in people that have low levels of ergothioneine, we get more neurodegenerative disease. There's more Alzheimer's, more Parkinson's, more mild cognitive impairment. There's more cardiovascular disease. People are more frail as they get older. People don't live quite as long when they have lower levels of ergothioneine, and pregnancies aren't as healthy. So in breast tissue, these transporters, when the breast tissue is lactating, they get increased 4 times. So breast milk has got high levels of ergothioneine in it, which support the development, of the puppy, or the kitten in their developmental phase. There's ergo transporters in the placenta to take ergothioneine from the blood and give it to the blood of the developing fetus, so it can be healthier.
Can I ask you about reproduction and ergothioneine or even mushrooms? Is obviously they're safe for pregnancy then, or possibly pre-pregnancy.
Definitely, the edible mushrooms are for sure. So the agaricus and the shiitake and the maitake, the lion's mane, all of those mushrooms are safe in pregnancy. And there's a human clinical trial in women where they got 100 grams of button mushrooms a day for 20 weeks during the early stage of their pregnancy. And the babies that were born were healthier than the non-mushroom babies. There was less overweight, less underweight. There was less preeclampsia. there was less gestational diabetes in the woman. So, there's a very, very important evolutionary role that ergothioneine plays. And when we don't get enough of it, we don't live as long and we're less healthy. And it's very likely to be the same in dogs and cats as well. And we just don't know exactly what the doses are. But this stuff is incredibly safe. Scientists gave up trying to prove that ergothioneine was toxic. A human could, I recommend 10 milligrams a day for a human, and maybe for a dog, it might be 10 milligrams a week, so you could just use one capsule a week, doesn't matter when you take it, your body absorbs it and hangs on to it. So as long as you're doing it on a regular frequency, that makes the most sense.
Is it safe for all animals, like horses, livestock?
Yes, there's even a clinical trial in horses. So stallions, there were 3 groups of stallions that were forced to run a 2-kilometer race at a sprint, and there was 18 of them and 6 horses in each group. So one group, they got 70 milligrams per kilo of ergothioneine
Wow.
before the race. Another group got it after the race, and the other group, the control group, didn't get any at all. And this is on PubMed. You can go and easily find it. It's free to read and download. And both groups of ergothioneine horses had improved behavior after the race. So clearly after a race like that, and you're the horse expert, not me, but clearly after 2Ks flat out, you're exhausted, you're a bit tired. So your behavior is going to be a little bit different. You'll be more sleepy, you'll bite your crib more often, you'll vocalize more often, you'll do all of those things that horses do. Well, the ergothioneine horses had the statistical significance was like 1 in 1,000 that these things happen by chance, compared to the horses that didn't get the ergothioneine. So the benefit of ergothioneine is that it supports any type of stressful setting, particularly stress that's oxidative. So when you're exercising, you're generating a lot of stress, and the ergothioneine protects against the consequences of that stress. The body's more efficient in the way that it deals with the stress, so you have less consequences as a result of that.
And it's legal.
And it's legal for the
And
moment.
it's legal. So all these people, I mean, there's a lot of money in race horses, barrel racing, performance horses. Lee, we need to
Yeah.
talk, man.
Yeah.
We
That
got
paper
the-
didn't quote the race times. I think they did that deliberately because the horse that got the ergothioneine prior probably ran significantly faster.
So, but less stress, probably less injury. We don't know for sure, but
Well, I think less injury would come when it was done over a period of time, not just on a single dose. So if you've got a dog that pulls sleds and does races in the cold, if you've got a greyhound, or if you've got an agility dog that runs through the hoops and does backflips and all of that stuff, all of those animals really need to get ergothioneine on a regular basis to support their more extreme levels of athleticism.
well, and
And
I think the neurodegenerative issues in dogs and horses has gone way up.
it
We
would help, and it helps in that. And the neurodegenerative piece is highly significant. And the mouse studies that have been done demonstrate clearly that the ergothioneine puts the brakes on the oxidative stress, which becomes inflammation in the neurological tissue, which brings about the various neurological diseases. And there's a relatively recent mouse study where they looked at the features of it that are going on, and there's significantly less of those processes in the mice that get the ergothioneine. And the mice that got ergothioneine, just at regular kind of human doses, 10 milligrams a day, they lived 29% longer than the mice that didn't get it, and they had significantly less, cognitive decline. And we see that play out in humans as well. The epidemiology is really impressive. The thing that holds us back with ergothioneine is that we don't yet have a blood test That's being worked on. It's possibly a year or two away. Once we get a blood test, it'll totally open ergothioneine up, and it will become a household name. It's relatively unknown right now, so
So
people that are getting
exciting.
on.
Yeah, we're learning early, and I can't wait to try it for my horses. I'm just thrilled, and I have performance clients, so I'm gonna kind of encourage them also to go down there. So is it like, how do I get a hold of this? Do I just order it from Real Mushrooms? Does it
Yeah,
come in?
Real Mushrooms has got a product called Ergo Plus, and it's golden oyster mushroom, which is a very, very high producer of ergothioneine. And then yeast have been taught how to make pure L-ergothioneine as well. So a little bit of that gets used just so that every capsule can claim 10 milligrams of ergothioneine. So there'll be a need to do a little bit of experimentation with the dosing.
Right.
And
Yeah,
Rob
because that's
Rob
a lot.
Silver, that is a lot. Yeah, Rob Silver, the veterinarian on the team, is working on getting his head around, what would be the exact doses. We don't currently know, but in a human, the scientific papers suggest that the low level, because we don't know, even in humans, we don't know what the upper level is. We know that in countries where people consume more mushrooms, when you get up around 5 milligrams a day, countries live longer, populations live longer, they have less neurological disease. So in the US, the human population's about 3 or 4 milligrams a day deficient in ergothioneine. So that's just the deficiency number. We don't actually know how much do you need to be optimally healthy. That's kind of where we're interested in, isn't it? So with animals, it'll be somewhat less than that. But because it's pure, it's entirely safe. You don't have to be worried about doing too much.
And
Um,
cats, everybody can have this.
yeah, and clearly a cat was never eating a mushroom, in the wild. But cats were eating, the organs and the blood of the prey animals that they consume. And ergothioneine, if you were to pick a tissue in an animal body where ergothioneine is the highest, it's the blood. So all of those cultures, human cultures that ate blood, we always think that it was, they're doing that because of the iron. Likely true, but more likely there was this, inner wisdom that we're getting the ergothioneine. So a cat would have got all of its ergothioneine needs by eating the liver and the adrenal glands, and the embodied blood, like in the prey that they were consuming.
That's so fascinating. Um, Anna Borkman did some, I don't know if it was research, but she was talking to Connor Brady about giving seizure dogs like blood pancakes, and they got well.
Yeah, that would
And
be the
I'm,
reason why.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's crazy. And so on seizure type of dogs, vertigo, anything like that, lion's mane, ergothioneine.
Yeah, and lion's mane is naturally high in ergothioneine. So every gram of lion's mane has about 1 milligram of ergothioneine. So, the hidden benefit of lion's mane is that it's a great vehicle for ergo, as well as the haricinones and all of the other things that are going on in there. But
So,
I would do the two together. And I think
okay,
with ergo, more is better. But
okay.
you don't need to go crazy with an animal. Just 1 or 2 milligrams a day is probably enough.
Joni wants me to ask you about your gourmet ape theory.
Yeah. Before I answer that question, though, if you use my name, LEE, and the letter E is a very hard letter for an Australian to say with an American accent. So you get what I'm saying. So if you use my name in the coupon code, you'll get 20% off. So if you're interested in experimenting with ergo, you can buy whatever you like, but you can get 20% off by using my
And
name.
you guys, Joni dropped the link on the Facebook
Yeah.
feed, so you guys can grab it there.
So when I was developing my thinking around ergothioneine, I had in my mind I had Terence McKenna, who promoted the stoned ape theory that said that consuming psychedelic mushrooms basically allowed humans to become more creative, and to be more social, develop language, solve complex problems, trap larger animals, get better quality food, therefore brain size increased. So I'm like, that's very highly plausible. Scientists think that it only explains a very small piece of what was going on in human evolution. But when I analysed it, clearly all of the things that our ancestors ate influenced our evolution. But I think it's an underrated feature of human evolution that mushrooms have never been included in any dietary metrics. So I developed the gourmet ape theory to explain the tight relationship that humans have with mushrooms, and the need for humans and most animals to be having mushrooms on a regular basis, so that they can be optimally healthy. And just in terms of diets, there's all these fads. I'm calling it fungitarian dietary behavior now, like vegetarian, fungitarian. We could call ourselves fungivores, where we eat mushrooms.
That's
but,
great.
All of the dietary knowledge around protein intakes and ancient diets never considered the fact that early humans ate mushrooms. So archaeologists take the bone from early humans and hominids, so Neanderthals, etc., and they look at the cartilage in the bone, and they look at the isotopes of carbon and nitrogen to understand the amount of protein that individual was eating back then. When those diets have been developed, we've got the paleo diet, for example, came from that type of work. None of those scientists ever considered that these people were eating mushrooms as well. And there's a few scientific papers that have looked at it, and there's evidence, direct evidence. You can scrape the teeth of these archaeological specimens, and then you can look at them under microscopes. You can sometimes do DNA analysis. And early humans were avid consumers of mushrooms.
Wow.
Because of the spores of the mushrooms that were in their teeth. And when you look at the isotope signatures of carbon and nitrogen, they're exactly the same as meat. So some of these diets that are Neanderthal had very low meat consumption. Some of them had no meat consumption, but they were very high in mushroom consumption, very high in bark and moss and seeds. So this was kind of like the beginnings of my gourmet ape theory, that we need to really start factoring in mushrooms as an integral part of our diet. We need to redesign the food pyramid and give mushrooms, take them out of the vegetable category and make them their own category, so that people become aware of the fact that there's nutrients that mushrooms provide us that we don't get from anywhere else.
Well, we know we need to remove the food pyramid altogether, so you can just make one.
Need to be revised. Yeah, I'm in the process of revising that food pyramid.
Yeah.
I'm going to just put a mushroom in the middle of it.
Exactly. That's so crazy. And I was telling you earlier that my dog used to actually go out in the horse pasture and look for these brown mushrooms, and he would eat them. And I freaked out because I know that for human consumption, mushrooms should be in a hot water type processing. So, I mean, horses out in a pasture with mushrooms, they can eat them raw without the same possible side effects that we can, it seems like.
Yeah, well, the reason to avoid eating mushrooms raw, there's a number of factors into that. When mushrooms are cultivated, they grow on manure. So you don't want to be consuming any E. coli from that manure, for example. And there are certain biologically active molecules in mushrooms that disturb animal physiology. So if you eat raw shiitake, for example, about 3 or 4% of people will get a dermatitis rash, which is really itchy and incredibly painful. And if you've ever had it, you're like, hell, I'm never going to eat another shiitake mushroom ever again in my entire life or my afterlives. Like, I'm done, like forever. It's that bad. And then as you were saying, portobellos have got some compounds in them. Agarotine is one, which in certain sensitive individuals or who have got a particular type of physiology, it might make them feel unwell. So cooking the mushroom denatures those constituents to make them, less dangerous in that sense. And then mushrooms have got a very tight cell wall, and the cooking process ruptures that cell wall to allow all of the therapeutic, goodies to get released into the extract. So, the predominant reason is that it enhances the bioavailability of all of the therapeutically relevant stuff in a mushroom. That's the primary reason. But there are some mushrooms where you could eat them raw, and the Neanderthals that I was talking about, they were probably eating them raw originally. Although if you go back 16,000 years in Europe, particularly in Spain, where these samples are from, those people were most likely cooking their mushrooms on hot rocks or barbecuing them on a stick. They were eating porcini mushrooms and agaricus mushrooms, just like, someone from the modern world would be doing it today.
Really cool. I have to say that's pretty awesome. Yeah, I have looked into like bulk distribution of mushrooms and called some of my local herbal companies that I purchase from and asked them, how's this processed? And God bless that gal that was on the phone. She goes, we just take the raw stuff and just powder it. I'm all, do you do mycelium? Like what else? She goes, I don't know. She couldn't tell me anything. And I was like, okay. And I'm like, super affordable. I don't know how I feel about this. So yeah,
You buyer
nervous about
beware.
it. Yeah. It's hard when your bulk distributor doesn't even know anything
No,
about
it's incredibly vexing. And, clearly, people like myself need to have certain affiliations. That's what makes the economics of it work. I need to earn an income. So, I earn a bit of income from my clinic. I earn a bit from my online school. I get a little bit from real mushrooms. That makes it all work. But at the heart of it, I'm very highly motivated to ensure that the tradition that I come from, the Western herbal medicine tradition, survives and prospers. I can trace my teacher-student relationships, back nearly 100 years. So I'm honoring, that wisdom, and every generation of herbalists that takes on that responsibility to be a spokesperson has got the love of that tradition and the dedication, and the I'm having trouble even getting the words out, but honoring the way that tradition gets, projected into the future. Because if we do it wrong en masse, then the public loses faith. So the issue with the mycelium on grain thing is I don't have a problem with it, as long as it's meets all of the validated steps that you need to do to ensure that you're continuing that tradition in an authentic way. At the moment, there isn't the knowledge base and there isn't the research to support it for the therapeutic claims that are being made. So, 10 years down the track, and it's a very dominant thing in the marketplace. Millions of people could say, I've tried mushrooms and they didn't work. So, and I tried them for quite a long time and it just didn't live up to the expectation. So I'm not going to bother anymore. And then the tradition gets ruined because of
yeah.
that.
Yeah, and that was my experience with a decent brand is I got sicker. I got yeasty on it because mycelium was grown on a substrate that was not
Yeah.
beneficial. There was no medicinal benefit to taking it. In fact,
Yeah.
it harm.
Yeah. And if you're making that choice yourself, you'd be like, oh, I'll be wiser next time. But if it's me, I'm a practitioner, I'm seeing 5 or 6 people every week. If I give them something that's inferior, they don't get well. They're like, Lee, how come I'm not getting well? How come I'm getting sicker? So I'm very highly motivated, to only use the things in clinic, that I know will be effective. And that's, is it backed up by the tradition? Is it backed up by research? Can I taste this product? And can I, just from my senses, because I've, in my tradition, you learn that stuff. You know what true peppermint should taste like. The tingling sensation of echinacea. How chilies should make your mouth burn. If you took a chili extract and didn't make your mouth burn, anybody would say, well, it can't be any good, can it? So, I'm highly motivated to make sure that, what I do personally is helping the patients. And then I'm very highly motivated to deliver a message into the public which is authentic without any kind of marketeering. Like, I'll give you the honest, examples. And we talked about the difference between liquids and powders before. You can have a high quality liquid just like you can have a high quality powder, or you can have a poor quality powder and a poor quality liquid. It's all about understanding how they're constructed and made, and then you can make choices about dosage and price and ease of use and the way that they're dispensed. And then that's a legitimate place to be making those decisions. It's not about arguing, oh, mine's better than yours, type of arguments. It's about honoring the tradition and ensuring that the future is good for the people that come after us, and that we haven't ruined it.
Right. I feel like some of the industry is so greed oriented, it makes it look like snake oil.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the best snake oil story is Echinacea angustifolia.
I love
You know,
that story. Please share that for our listeners because it is the coolest story.
in my clinic, up until I got invested in mushrooms, it was my best-selling herb. It's not so much anymore. But the company that I worked with, they still have, I think, the best echinacea product in the world, and it's made in the same way that it was made in the US back in the 1930s. And so I've been talking about this and using it for many years. I went to the Lloyd Library in Cincinnati a number of years ago, and I spent a whole day. And the Lloyd brothers were chemists in Cincinnati in the late 1800s, early 1900s. They were very dominant. They would take all sorts of plants and turn them into extracts and sell them to practitioners. And they had a vast treasure trove of echinacea data. So I had them bring out all the journals and bring out all of the bottles. And so I got to read the journals, and it was just the best day ever. So the snake oil story was that a guy called Dr. Mayer, Meyer, had a cart, and he would go around the outback in the West selling his potions that would cure all diseases. So if you had a snake bite, it would cure the snake bite. If you had tuberculosis, it would cure your tuberculosis. If you had a bone fracture, it'd cure it. And all of the medical minds at the time said, these claims are too outlandish to be true. It's just not possible. And the Lloyd brothers had this perspective as well. So Uri Lloyd, there were two brothers that ran the company. They got some samples of this stuff and they started doing their own experiments. And they're like, holy hell, these stories are actually true. Like, it really is the miracle worker. And in the 1930s, it was the number one herb being sold on the west coast of the US. By 1935, you had the Flexner Report, and all of those eclectic and physiomedical schools were all shut down, and herbal medicine kind of died a sudden death. But when I read through all of the journals, and I was very interested in sepsis at the time, because sepsis is something that modern medicine doesn't have very much success treating. And curiously, echinacea was the best remedy for sepsis. And there was literally thousands of anecdotes, entries from doctors writing in saying, I had a patient that was nearly dying. 5 milliliters of your extract every 20 minutes, over the course of a day, allowed these people to survive. So now echinacea doesn't enjoy that kind of rich history, because the alkylamide chemistry, the things that make your mouth tingle when you take good echinacea, are very hard to retain in the extract. So there's lots of echinacea products out there that are being sold that don't have the chemistry which allows the immune system to receive the benefit. So what was the world's best medicine has now been kind of diluted, and only a very small percentage of people ever get to experience the real thing. And curiously enough, mushrooms now play a really important role in sepsis. So there's a lot of overlap between mushrooms and echinacea. They do very similar things, and mushrooms are less expensive than echinacea. So I only use echinacea in very acute situations now, whereas preventatively I'm using mushrooms. And I find that the at least the human patient experiences a lot less health challenge, particularly in the immune department, when mushrooms are taken on a very regular basis, like every day over the course of years. You don't see the full benefits in months, you see the full benefits 1 or 2 years down the track.
So mushrooms, you really want to play the long game, preventative, longevity.
Yeah. And there are many things in life like that, aren't there? Like exercise. You can't just do a week's worth of exercise per year. You got to do it, every week you got to do some, because it's cumulative. You can't have a good diet just for 1 month out of the year and then eat crappy fast food the rest of the year. You've got to have a good diet all the time. So mushrooms fit into that mindset. It's a lifestyle, lifespan thing. When you do it as a lifestyle across the course of your lifespan, you'll be much healthier, you'll have less disease, and you'll live longer.
Well, and excitingly, there's way more mushrooms coming up, not the standard 7 to 10 mushrooms that we always see on the shelf. And you're in the forefront of that.
Yeah, and it's a really exciting place to be.
Right on. Lee, thank you for your time. Do you
My
have your
pleasure.
school? Is your school coming up soon? Is it like in certain times that you roll it out, or is it yearly?
The stuff that I do is all on demand online. So leecarrollherbalist.com is my website.
Excellent.
That's also my Instagram handle. So if you're wanting to get, your listeners are wanting to get, regular good quality snippets of information, if you follow me on Instagram, I'm posting 3 or 4 times a week some good quality stuff to tickle the curiosity.
Michelle Cummings is actually also an Aussie, and she says she's going to be reaching out to you.
Oh,
So
fantastic.
she's
I'd
right
love to hear
here
from you.
live on the Zoom with us right
Yeah.
now. So very cool.
Fantastic, this modern world, isn't it?
Isn't it fun?
Yeah.
Hi, Lee.
So
Hello.
this, Michelle, go ahead. And you guys,
Hi,
if you,
Michelle.
we've talked for quite a while. Lee, if you need to go, I understand it. But if you want to answer a few questions, if people have it.
I'm happy to answer a few questions for sure.
Lee, I own the Natural Pet Pharmacy in Australia. So we only launched about 8 weeks ago. And
Oh, fantastic. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. So my past, though, is the Stand Pet Beds, which is the only patented therapeutic non-toxic pet bed in the world. But so I've learned as much as I can with that business. So I've gone into natural supplements for pets, because by the time they get to me, the owners are looking for a silver bullet, and I tend to take them back to the beginning, which is diet. Essentially that's it. We go back to the beginning. Obviously we look at vaccinations and all that sort of stuff. So the Natural Pet Pharmacy came about because of the need for education and quality products. Being an Aussie, you would see yourself that so many Australians are persuaded when it comes to mushrooms by the organic claim. They don't look beyond that, and they don't realise that these organic claims, they're grown in sheds, so they're not receiving sunlight. They're not receiving all the, well, you know what I mean, sunlight, but they're not receiving their environmental contributions to their growth and their potency. So I would love to speak to you about, because the Natural Pet Pharmacy is releasing its own range of products, and to get your insight into sourcing the most beneficial mushrooms in Australia, or bringing them in from overseas, because up until now I have been sourcing them from indirectly through an Australian importer, but they're coming from China and their quality has been superb.
Yeah, well, I'll be happy to have that conversation with you. However, I would like to correct what you just said. Mushrooms grown indoors in a controlled environment on the right substrate in an organic manner are very, very highly effective, and there's nothing kind of questionable about their quality.
Might be the ones I've been looking at that have been coming to me, and there are some, compared to the ones I've been using and the trialing of these others, I think it's where I start to get a bit questionable with them is the amount that they're producing to be able to meet the demand. you know, is it going to have that same quality? And some of the practices of the ones I've been speaking to have got me a little bit concerned, to the point where I won't be sourcing from them, because I just feel it's not adding up.
Yeah. Well, I'm happy to have that conversation with you. And clearly there's a lot of science involved, and you need to be an expert to assess the quality. And I'd be happy to give you some guidance.
That would be wonderful.
Thank you.
Right
Thanks.
on. Anybody else? Janice, any questions? My mushroom loving friend.
No, I'm just amazed, and I just placed my first order. Um, I'm just really excited to learn. I just signed up for um your Instagram, and I'll look into
Oh,
learning from you.
fantastic. Thanks,
Yeah,
Janice.
I'm very excited. I use mushrooms for my dog. I was looking for the product. I don't have it here.
Yeah.
Powder form for my dog for his immune system, but this is really good. My dog has seizures, so this would be a great thing to try for my dog for his seizures, to see, neurologically, if it would help stabilize him out a little bit.
Definitely it would, yeah. And the beauty of mushrooms is that, you can, take some yourself and then give some to your animal.
Well, exactly. We're going to share. This
A
is
mushroom party.
really
You guys are going to have a fungi party.
Yeah. I'm very excited. Thank you so much. This was fascinating. I love this.
Mind blowing. Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely mind blowing.
I am so thrilled we have this for future recording. Thank you, Lee, for your time. You are a wealth of knowledge, and
My pleasure, Poppy.
hopefully we can catch up to you one day in our knowledge base.
Well, yeah, I had a great time. It was fantastic. So thank you.
We appreciate your time and your knowledge. Take care, you guys. Have a wonderful week.
Good night.
Thank you.
Bye.